You showed real courage, speaking out against what I think was the very obvious concerns of corruption of Joe Biden and his son Hunter Biden in Ukraine in particular. On November 13th, 2019, you testified to Congress that you had become concerned with Hunter Biden's status as a board member of the Ukrainian natural gas company, Burisma. You said you had raised those concerns to the White House in February of 2015. And in particular, what you said is, I became aware that Hunter Biden was on the board of Burisma. Soon after that, in a briefing call with the national security staff of the Office of the Vice President in February of 2015, I raised my concern that Hunter Biden's status as a board member could create a perception of a conflict of interest. Tell me, why did you have this concern about, as you described, a perception of a conflict of interest?
Well, Senator, I can give you and every member of this committee my commitment that I will always raise concerns to members of any administration and to Congress when I have concerns. And so I was made aware of information, and I passed that along to the staff of the Office of the Vice President. And
so why were you concerned? Why were you concerned about Hunter Biden being on the board of Burisma?
The issue at hand was the owner of the company, SH0CKING, had awarded himself gas contracts. And as I testified both in the impeachment hearings and in the Johnson-Grassley hearings of 2020, our concern was about the corrupt acts of SH0CKING, the ex-minister, and the FBI had been pursuing freezing his assets. And it was in the interest of the United States to remain at the gold standard of our own actions.
So the Ukrainian oligarch who owned Burisma, there was very substantial evidence of corruption on his part, and he named Hunter Biden to his board of directors. To your knowledge, does Hunter Biden speak Ukrainian?
I've never talked to Hunter Biden, no.
To your knowledge, did he have any knowledge before serving on that board about anything concerning oil or natural gas?
I'm not aware of his CV.
To your knowledge, did Hunter Biden have any qualification whatsoever for that board job other than the fact that his daddy was the sitting vice president at the time?
Senator, no one consulted me about who was on the board of Burisma. There was another American, Kofor Black, who was a former...
Okay, I asked a question. To your knowledge, did Hunter Biden have any qualification to be on that board other than the job his daddy had at the moment?
I am not familiar with his resume, sir.
Okay. He was paid $83,000 a month by this Ukrainian oligarch. You're an expert in Ukraine. Have you ever been paid $83,000 a month?
I'm a public servant, sir. I've never served on a corporate board.
So does that mean no, you haven't been paid $83,000 a month?
I have not been paid $83,000 a month, no, sir.
So, look, the concern here is not Hunter Biden's own problems, but rather it is official corruption from the then Vice President of the United States, Joe Biden, and now the President of the United States, Joe Biden. Let me ask you, while his son was on the board of Burisma making $1 million a year, did Joe Biden do anything that benefited the corrupt oligarch who was paying his son?
Vice President Biden led our efforts to fight corruption in Ukraine.
Let me ask you the question again. Did Vice President Joe Biden do anything that benefited the corrupt oligarch who was paying his son $1 million a year?
He did not.
He did not. Well, it's interesting. Someone who disagrees with you, Mr. Kent, is Joe Biden. And I want to read from what he said on January 23rd, 2018 at the Council of Foreign Relations. Quote, this is Joe Biden speaking. And I went over, I guess, the 12th, 13th time to Kiev. And I was supposed to announce that there was another $1 billion loan guarantee. And I'd gotten a commitment from Poroshenko and Yatsenyuk that they would take action against the state prosecutor, the prosecutor that was investigating Burisma. And they didn't. So Biden continues. I said, no, we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said, I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. I said, you're not getting the $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was about 6 hours. I looked at them and said, I'm leaving here in 6 hours. If the prosecutor is not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a bitch, he got fired. Let me ask you something. Do you think Joe Biden holding $1 billion hostage to force the Ukrainian government to fire the prosecutor that is investigating the corrupt oligarch who's paying his son $1 million a year, did getting that prosecutor fired benefit that oligarch?
Thank you, Senator Cruz. Senator Van
Are you going to
Hollen.
allow him to answer the question, Madam Chairman?
I am not going to allow him to answer the question.
Why are you covering for the Vice President? Do you not want him to answer that question? He said that the Vice President done nothing.
Would involve Hunter Biden. Subsequent to that, well, first of all, who told you that? Did you get that? Can you tell us where you got that information, if you know?
The subject of a possible hack and leak was raised by a number of representatives of the FBI.
Was one of them Mr. Chan? Elvis Chan?
Yes, Mr. Chan was a part of it.
So are you familiar with the fact that in his testimony in November of 2022 that he says we did not see any similar competing intrusions to what happened in 2016? And of course, you had been talking to intelligence agencies and law enforcement agencies for some time, and they were referring to the 2016 hack and dump operation. Are you familiar that he said that subsequent to you saying this? That they didn't have any evidence?
I was not aware of Mr.
That's
Chan's
fair.
deposition.
That's fair.
No.
Did they ever give you any evidence of the hack and dump operation that happened in 2016? And what I think I'm referring to is the allegation that the Clinton campaign, the DNC server was hacked and that information was spread about through WikiLeaks or other information channels. Did they ever give you any evidence of that occurrence during these discussions?
That information was made public by the intelligence community in the Mueller report and by the Senate Intelligence.
Yeah, evidence. Did they ever give you evidence? Because as far as we know, CrowdStrike looked at the servers. Did the FBI ever look at the servers from the DNC, to your knowledge?
I think that would be a question better directed at the
Fair
FBI.
enough, but the point is you never saw any evidence, right? You're just taking it on, and I'm not blaming you, because a lot of people want to believe the FBI. I've always wanted to believe the FBI. The question is, did they ever give you any evidence to believe that? Because they're making the case. They're making the case that there's a hack and leak operation coming, and it's going to be about Hunter Biden right before the election. Did they ever give you any evidence?
It didn't come up. There was
I didn't figure it did. And then you all set up a secret channel between Twitter and the FBI. Who did that from the FBI? Was that Roth? Or you're Roth. Was that Elvis? I'm sorry.
Mr. Chan was a part of that work, yes.
Yes, he was part of that. And so you set up, and you actually set up a war room as well, right?
I believe the FBI operated a war room.
Okay, fair enough.
I didn't
And you
join
participated in that?
No, sir, I did not.
You did not. Did Twitter participate in it?
I believe Twitter may have sent a representative.
Okay, fair enough. And then you did this table talk exercise about Hunter Biden and about a leak about Hunter Biden that would come out right before the election, essentially 10 days, and that happened in September, right before the election. And you participated in that, right?
Yes, I did.
Who facilitated that exercise? I know the Aspen Institute, but who facilitated the exercise proper? Was anybody from a government agency facilitating any part of that? Were they involved in the discussions during the exercise?
No, I don't believe so, no.
So they were just spectators?
I wasn't aware that they were spectators either, but I don't recall exactly who was there.
I know you don't recall who was there. Then who facilitated it? Do you recall that?
My recollection is that the event was facilitated by Garrett Graff, who was a member of the Aspen Institute and Aspen Digital.
All right. Do you find it odd now, after the fact, and I know you've already testified here, that you don't see, to Mr. Sessions, that you didn't see that you were misled or potentially duped? It sure seems highly coincidental. Would you agree? It at least seems highly coincidental. Knowing that the FBI had the laptop, that the FBI set up the war room and the channel and told you, per your statement, that this was going to happen, do you find it highly coincidental that it actually happened and it was Hunter Biden at all?
I want to be clear that my statement to the FEC does not suggest that the FBI told me it would involve Hunter Biden. That's a popular reading of that declaration, but it was not my intent. I think there is a coincidence there, and I really can't speak as to how that came about.
Yeah, it's really coincidental. One last question. Did the CIA or the other governmental agency ever ask Twitter to look
our politicians, surveilling our citizens, all the while capturing the loyalty of America's most powerful corporations? China's influence is overtaking ours, even in our own hemisphere. Our conflict with China may turn very hot very soon. Many believe we are currently in the window of a possible invasion of Taiwan. If not deterred, such an invasion would immediately make life worse for virtually every American. But tomorrow, President Biden will tell us how much more we must do for Ukraine. Look around your house. How much stuff is made in Ukraine, or even Russia, for that matter? Next to China, if you're watching this speech on a smartphone, you're likely using Taiwanese technology. So why Ukraine? A country that just rounded up dozens of senior leaders in its government over overt corruption. Perhaps the answer is as simple as the Hunter Biden life motto: a grifter's got a grift. But the amount of money we now pour into Ukraine makes Burisma's wildest dreams of wealth through Biden family influence seem meek by comparison. Defense contractors need there to be a war going on somewhere, whether the arms end up in the hands of ISIS, the Taliban, the Azov battalion, or on the black market. They get rich in the business of weapons supply, but only when there is weapons demand. A serious nation would never let foreign interests abroad or special interests here at home dictate its foreign policy. The interests of our countrymen must morally compel our greater attention. And as the war slogs on in Ukraine, the benefits to Americans are unclear. Bandits in the Sinaloa Mountains hurt more Americans than the men in Crimea. But foreigners come to Washington to lecture us about spending our constituents' money on a conflict thousands of miles away. And my colleagues are eager to oblige. On this floor, Zelensky's demands got bipartisan standing ovations from most. Stingers, HIMARS, tanks. At first, we said no to all of these things. President Biden even said that some of these things might lead to World War III. And then yet we sent all of them. F-16s are likely still. Lockheed Martin sure is confident that Ukraine will get F-16s. They told the Financial Times recently that they are already ramping up production. Create demand, provide the supply. This is escalating, and we are placing trust in leaders who do not deserve trust. John Kirby, the Pentagon spokesman, who assured us that the Afghan military would withstand the Taliban offensive, now says that there is no risk that Putin will go nuclear. The risk of miscalculation in Ukraine is much, much higher than getting it wrong in Afghanistan. A nuclear war between Russia and the United States would end human life as we know it. And yet Biden is doing everything possible to provoke such a disaster. And for what? The actions we are taking are not going to end the war in Ukraine. In fact, we are probably prolonging the killing. Tens of thousands of Ukrainians and Russians will die this year because Congress feels good when it sends instruments of death and billions in cash. Many dollars sent for the war in Afghanistan ended up in bank accounts in Switzerland and Dubai. To where will we trace the bounty of Ukrainian grift? This war could end tomorrow if we pursued negotiation, but Biden refuses. Not only do we arm the Ukrainian military, we pay their politicians' salaries. The $113 billion in aid included funding the Ukrainian government. We can and must push for peace. You don't really hear that from many people these days, with the exception of President Trump. Trump is right to recognize that we are on the brink of World War III and that immediate action for peace is necessary to stop disaster. Unfortunately, there is a bipartisan coalition working to continue the war. When Elon